I want to talk about a villain who does not feel like a villain. Most villains are easy to read. They want power. They want revenge. They want to watch the world burn for reasons that feel satisfying in their own twisted logic. But Pagan Min is different. The more you look at him, really look at him, past the pink suit and the casual cruelty and the unsettling charm, the more you start to realize something uncomfortable. Pagan Min did not build an empire because he wanted to rule the world. He built it because the one person he loved left him, and he had absolutely no idea what else to do with the pain. This is his story, and it is one of the most quietly devastating portraits of abandonment, obsession, and grief that I have ever encountered in fiction. Part 1. The Man Before the Monster. Before Pagan Min was a king, he was just a man in love. He came from Hong Kong, the son of a drug lord who saw him as nothing more than an instrument, someone to be used, controlled, and eventually discarded. His father did not raise him. His father weaponized him. And Pagan, like every child who grows up in the shadow of a parent who treats love as a transaction, learned early that the world was not a safe place to be vulnerable. Then he met Ishwari, and for the first time in his life, something changed. Ishwari was not impressed by his money or his power or his connections. She saw him, the actual person underneath the performance. And Pagan, who had spent his entire life learning that people only stayed when there was something to gain, fell completely. They had a daughter, Lakshmana. And in those brief years, Pagan Min was something he had never been allowed to be before. A father, a partner, a person who belonged somewhere. Psychologists call this a secure attachment. When a person who has spent their life in emotional isolation finally finds a relationship that feels safe enough to invest in completely. For someone like Pagan, who had been conditioned to expect abandonment and exploitation, this kind of love was not just meaningful. It was everything. It was the entire foundation of his identity as a human being. Part 2. When the foundation collapses. Then Ishwari left, and she took Ajay with her, not Lakshmana, their daughter together, but Ajay, her son from another man. Lakshmana died shortly after, alone, without her father. I want you to sit with that for a moment. The one person who made Pagan feel like his life had meaning left him. The daughter he never got to watch grow up died without him there, and he was given no warning. No explanation, no chance to fight for what he had. What happens to a person when the thing that made them human is taken away without warning? For most people, grief looks like sadness, like withdrawal, like the slow, painful process of learning to carry something heavy. But for people who have already been abandoned once before, people whose earliest lessons taught them that love is always temporary, always conditional, grief does not always look like grief. Sometimes it looks like control. Sometimes it looks like rage. Sometimes it looks like building an entire kingdom around the ghost of what you lost, because the alternative is admitting that you are completely, irreparably broken. Psychologists call this complicated grief, when a person cannot process a loss in the normal way, often because the loss triggers wounds that were already there long before. For Pagan, losing Ishwari and Lakshmana did not just break his heart. It confirmed the thing his father had taught him as a child, that he was not someone worth staying for. Part 3. The kingdom as a coping mechanism. So Pagan did what people do when they cannot survive their pain in its raw form. He transformed it into something else. He took Kyrat. He built a regime. He surrounded himself with people who could not leave because they were too afraid to. He filled his palace with fine things and loud people and the constant performance of someone who does not care about anything, because the alternative was sitting alone in the silence and feeling everything he was running from. This is not unique to fictional villains. We see this pattern everywhere in the real world. People who cannot process their grief build structures around themselves. Some build companies, some build walls, some build entire personalities. The funny one, the ruthless one, the one who does not need anyone. Pagan Min built a country, and at the center of that country, preserved and protected, was a shrine to Lakshmana, a sacred space that he never stopped visiting. A place where the man underneath the monster still went to grieve the daughter he never got to raise. Here is what most people miss about Pagan Min. His cruelty is not evidence that he stopped feeling. It is evidence that he felt too much and had no healthy way to carry it. The most dangerous people are rarely those who feel nothing. They are those who feel everything and have learned to weaponize it. Part 4. The king nobody expected him to be. Here is the part of Pagan Min's story that most people never talk about, and it is the part that complicates everything. Under Pagan Min's rule, there were no child soldiers in Kyrat. Think about what that means. In a region torn apart by conflict, in a kingdom built by a man who came from violence and who used violence as his primary language, children were not recruited into his army. They were not handed weapons. They were not made into instruments of war the way Pagan himself had been made into an instrument by his own father. Early marriage was not widespread under his reign either. The kind of coercion that strips young people of their futures before they have even begun. That was not a feature of the Kyrat he built. These are not small details. These are choices, deliberate ones. And when you understand who Pagan Min is, when you understand that he had a daughter he never got to protect, a child he lost before he could be her father, these choices start to make a different kind of sense. He could not save Lakshmana. He could not be there when she needed him. But he could build a kingdom where children were not handed the weight of adult violence before they were ready to carry it. This is something psychologists call displaced protection. When a person cannot protect the specific thing they love, they redirect that protective instinct outward, toward anyone who reminds them of what they lost. Pagan could not save his daughter. So somewhere in the architecture of the kingdom he built around her memory, he made sure other daughters and sons would not be taken the way she was taken from him. Compare this to the Golden Path, the resistance movement painted as the heroes of the story. They recruit children. They use whoever is available. They justify it with ideology and the language of liberation. And the game asks you, quietly and without making a big deal of it, which side is actually protecting the people of Kyrat? The answer is more uncomfortable than the game lets on. Part 5. The moment that changes everything. There is a moment in Far Cry 4 that most players never see. At the very beginning of the game, Pagan Min tells Ajay to wait for him. He will be right back. He just needs to handle something. Most players take this as an obvious trick, an excuse to escape, to find weapons, to start the revolution. So they run. But if you wait, if you actually sit at that table and do nothing for 15 minutes, Pagan comes back. He sits down. He has a meal with you. And then, without any violence, without any manipulation, he takes you exactly where you came to go, to the shrine of Lakshmana, so you can scatter your mother's ashes. He keeps his promise. That is all he ever wanted to do. This single detail reframes everything. Pagan Min was not waiting to trap Ajay. He was waiting to fulfill the last request of the woman he never stopped loving. He wanted to do right by Ishwari, even after she left him, even after everything. What does it say about a person that they can rule with cruelty and still, in the quietest corner of themselves, be waiting to do one kind thing for someone who is no longer there? It says that people are never just one thing, that the capacity for tenderness and the capacity for destruction can exist in the same person at the same time. and that the most broken people are often the ones who loved the most deeply and simply had no idea how to survive it when that love was gone. Part 6. The ending he chose. After Ajay scatters Ishwari's ashes at Lakshmana's shrine, Pagan Min walks away. He boards a helicopter, and he leaves. He does not fight. He does not try to hold on to the kingdom he spent years building. He just goes. Because the kingdom was never the point. It was always just something to do with the grief. And now that Ishwari's last wish has been honored, now that he has done the one thing he could still do for her, there is nothing left to hold him there. There is something deeply human about this ending. We spend so much of our lives building things, careers, reputations, relationships, defenses, as a response to pain we never properly processed. And sometimes, when the original wound is finally acknowledged, all of it just falls away. Not because we fixed anything, but because we no longer need it to survive. Pagan Min leaves Kyrat the same way Ishwari left him. Without warning, without explanation, without looking back. Whether that is poetic justice or just the only thing he knew how to do, I will let you decide. What Pagan Min teaches us. Pagan Min is not a story about power. He is a story about what happens when a person's entire emotional world collapses and they are never given the tools to rebuild it properly. He is a warning about what unprocessed grief can become when it is given enough time and enough resources. About how the things we build to protect ourselves from pain often end up hurting everyone around us and never actually touch the wound underneath. But he is also something else. He is a reminder that even in the most broken people, there is often a logic to their kindness that the world never bothers to look for. That a man can be cruel in one hand and protective in the other. That the line between villain and protector is often thinner than we want to believe. And that where a person falls on that line often depends less on who they are and more on what they lost and when. Some of us grieve quietly, some of us grieve loudly, and some of us, without ever realizing it, build entire kingdoms around the shape of what we lost. And in doing so, accidentally protect the people inside them from the very pain that broke us. The question is not whether you have done this. The question is whether you are brave enough to recognize it